Edit mode operations is rather basic and simple, so let's talk about it. Add modifier is the same as add modifier that we discussed up here. This is just another way for users to access it. Display marks will toggle if marks in edit mode are showing. For example, we will go ahead and just mark everything. And if we don't want to actually see marks, we can choose to not display them. Keep in mind, of course, that even though they're not being displayed, we are able to still have the behavior happening for these marks. So if we were to choose to display them again, we could still see them, but sometimes users want to have their marking information hidden for just being able to work without being disturbed. However, sometimes it is important to go in and display your marks in order to make sure that you're not marking an area like here that you may not actually want to be marking. So the next one that we'll be talking about in operations is adjust bevel weight. This one is more of a classic and is actually delegated to mark as alt click. So alt clicking this will allow you to adjust bevel weight, but if you are looking for the dedicated option, it is still here. It won't show up if you're dealing with an angle workflow, which is what you're generally dealing with the bevel. You can see at the bottom where it says limit angle. This is referring to the bevel modifier using the angle as a limit method. We'll press L, which will make this use weight. And one of the added benefits of a weight, of course, is the ability to go in and lower the amount of weight influence that's happening to an area. But this does have some issues when it comes to multi-bevel stepping workflows and things like that. So it is important to keep in mind that whenever you're working this way, you are going down a slightly different road. So to change this back to a limit method of angle, we'll just press L, and we could change this back over to angle just by pressing L a couple of times. So continuing on, in edit mode, under operations, we also have demote. Demote is a legacy option that basically will remove marking from edges but keeps the sharp. So right now we have this thing being beveled with the limit method of angle. Let's press L again to change this back to weight. And we have this area that's being beveled. Let's say we didn't want this to be beveled at all. Well, we can actually go in here and choose demote, and we can choose to basically remove all the bevel weight and clear everything else except for sharp information, basically allowing this area to be exempt. It's kind of silly to do it with just a single edge, but if we select a face and we demote it, we can see that we get a much more controllable result when dealing with the weight workflow. So it definitely has its uses when used creatively. The next thing we want to talk about is mirror. Mirror has already been talked about multiple times, so I won't be going into depth with it again, but spin is another story. When it comes to spin, we could take this object and look at it in top view, and I'll just move it up above, and we will just go under operations and choose spin. And we see that with spin, it basically will place it at a different area, and that's all there is to it. You can press F9 and choose what you want to do with it. It's basically the same exact one as the one built into Blender, except we just made it where it jumps to 360 automatically because the other spin for some reason was on not 360, which made it a very different type of spin experience, I felt. When it comes to spin, also keep in mind, because it spins at 360, one of the iterations is being placed exactly on top of the first one, so you may want to delete that in order to keep things fairly pure. Another thing I also use spin for is if we shift A and add a mesh circle, we will just go in edit mode and delete this vertice and delete this vertice as well, and then we'll just alt click this and press X and delete that as well, and we'll just press E and extrude, and we'll just select this piece and choose to spin. And so in this case we want to use duplicates, and then I'll just lower the amount of steps, and so now we basically have this spinning circle. I create these all the time whenever I'm creating drivers, where I will go under the rotation area right here, and we'll just type in a driver like pound cos frame times 0.15 close parentheses, and then we press enter, and this thing will just rotate endlessly between -60 and +60, which can come in handy for dealing with like automatic driver creation and setting up basic rigs and stuff like that, and showing how it would work instead of having to rotate things over and over and over, which is where this definitely comes in handy. But I just wanted to show some applications for how I use spin. So we'll press Control N and we'll go to a new file where we're back in business. And the next thing I want to talk about is ToShape. ToShape is the exact same option that you see here. It's just added under operations because it's just an option. And for some reason we have these under operations as well, but more than likely we'll be doing a cleanup at some point to remove some of these extra options that don't need to exist. Another one that I want to talk about is ToRope, and in order to show this one, we have to grab an edge and bevel it, and then select this point and this point. And if we go under operations and we choose ToRope, this thing will basically convert a selection into a rope. And this can come in handy for a plethora of reasons, but it's just one of those things that we added to Hops tool. And it was just so fun and nice to see added that we wanted to see it propagate throughout Hops as a modeling tool as well. So users could get in and do these same things that you see me doing here. And then of course, when it comes to rope, you can have a little bit of fun with rope just by going into the modifier panel and looking for the correct modifiers. Like I like to go to the radial displays and turn off the driver by deleting it and then making it have a wider angle that it comes out. And then going to extrusion screw and locating the screw amount and actually raising that amount to make it coil a little bit more like a DNA helix. And this will open it up for you to actually increase the count. So I'm always pondering how we can raise the count and then have these other values adjust accordingly in order to open up for it. But this allows for a very different type of rope. And if we select this curve is actually set to be seen in front, which means that if we press Q and adjust curve to give it thickness, it actually shows in front, which looks weird. So we'll press Control tilde and go inside the helper, and under the option for meshes, we'll just turn off show in front. And now when we press Q and adjust curve, we have this very interesting different type of rope on this side that looks more like a sci-fi hose versus this one that's actually a cute little rope. So we'll press Control N and go back to our default scene. Previously we talked about EM macro and how EM macro is built up out of great neural panel edge and panel face. So under operations, of course under mesh tools, we have great face, neural, panel edge, and panel face. So if you go into these, they basically run exactly the same as previously when we were discussing them. So there's nothing more to them except now you can run them basically as standalones if you were a fan of a particular version of one of these. But really EM macro is the way to go to get the best of all of this in a singular all-in-one tool. But of course, if you want to go in here and just play with something like panel edge to just bring it up exclusively, you can. So for that reason, this option exists. It always existed before, but EM macro has shown that basically combining them is definitely a much better way to approach this thing.